As a channel that primarily covers romance anime, the broad strokes of the shows that I talk about often share a lot in common. Part of that is just the very nature of genre conventions. Certain moments, like confessions for example, are going to look similar from one anime to the next. When something really breaks from the mold, it of course stands out. But beyond moments, tone can also become somewhat homogeneous. The whole premise of last week's split screen was that characters like Anko and Subaru stand out in their respective series due to the shift in mood they elicit. Sometimes, though, anime come along that take a more maximalist approach to the tone that they set. From episode to episode, scene to scene, even moment to moment, they are a mishmash of vibes. When done well, it creates something super lively and exciting. I bring this up because I just finished watching through season 1 of Witchwatch the other day. Now, technically, this isn't classified as a romance anime, and I think that that's a little bit wrong. But we'll get to that. More importantly, I was surprised at how much it reminded me of another anime, Love is War. Now, before anything else, I am not saying that Witchwatch is anywhere as good as Love is War. At its best, Witchwatch peaked at like a 7.5 for me. Love is War at its peak, we're talking real claims at a 10. What they do share in common, though, is that desire to blend as many tones, characters, and plot lines together as humanly possible in each 24-minute episode. So, what I want to dive into today is examining what these two anime have in common, what works about their approaches to mood and rhythm, and also what lends to that gap between the two of them when it comes to assessing their overall quality. More than any other split screen to date, I feel it's important to start with what these two shows have in common. Witchwatch is listed as a comedy and fantasy show, with romance only popping up as one of Crunchyroll's 4 genre tags. But I think that's not fully representative of the show. Right from the start, it's established that Nico is in love with Morihito. The tension between her love for him and his general stoicism is core to the entire first season. And this idea of romantic tension is a big shared dynamic with Love is War. Both anime are very plot-driven. The different arcs of the stories are focused around concrete events. The student election in Love is War or the school festival in Witchwatch are 2 easy examples. Things actually happen, to put it simply. The 2 main relationships, Kaguya and Miyuki and Nico and Morihito, are the main through lines to these anime, but they weave in and out of those plot structures. You can go a couple episodes at a time without addressing the romance at all, something unusual for the genre in general. One of the reasons this is possible is how large the casts of supporting characters are for these 2 series. Side character is not an appropriate moniker for the characters in these anime. Characters like Yu and Miko in Love is War, and Nemu and Keigo in Witchwatch have their own entire storylines, motivations, and relationships. Some of the standout moments of each anime involve them, like Yu's backstory or any scene of the slowly developing romance between Keigo and Nemu. And these few I've mentioned are just scratching the surface. Both anime do a wonderful job of making their worlds feel very lived in and vibrant, and this big cast really plays into the comedy angle of both shows. But what we really need to cover is that core similarity that I highlighted in the intro. Both anime are wholly dedicated to packing as many tones as possible into every moment of their episodes. First and foremost, of course that means romance and comedy. But that doesn't begin to cover it. These shows will start action-oriented, jump into a quiet romantic moment, interrupt it with a blast of comedy, and then hit you with something really sad. The worlds that our characters inhabit are patently ridiculous. In Witchwatch, that's easily observed with the injection of magic and monsters. But it's equally ridiculous in Love is War, with the prestigious school and social dynamics Miyuki and Kaguya feel beholden to. I found this funny emotion diagram on Wikipedia. I think any good story covers most of these bases, but not at the pace or with the peaks and valleys of these two shows. I mean, just look at the titling conventions of their episodes. Every episode is like 3 episodes in one. How could this be anything but jam-packed full of characters, feelings, and plotlines? Now though, we need to start pulling these series apart. What makes Love is War acclaimed, but Witchwatch just a good show? I think it comes down to the more specific parts of Witchwatch's execution. Because generally, I think that the characters are interesting and the writing is good. Especially when a lot of them come together at once, the show really comes to life. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that despite being moderately well received, this probably isn't what Baiburi Animation Studios was hoping for when it made its first season. The package suggests that this was a big swing for the studio. A 25-episode first season, a second season teased at the end of the first one, and a banger OP from Yoasobi. There's clearly a lot of love poured into this project, even in something like the episode teasers or the really cool OP in progress version they had. But at the end of it, I haven't heard much about the show in the year or so it's been out. I'm not saying it's a failure by any stretch, to be clear, and if you think my assessment of its success is wrong by any means, please let me know. Regardless though, I am going to go out on a limb and say that I think it falls short of Love is War because of the lack of growth in its main relationship that ties the whole story together. For as many plot lines and side characters that poke their heads into the world of Witchwatch, the main thing we have our eye on as an audience is the relationship between Nico and Morihito. It operates sort of like a measuring stick for the rest of the series. When everything else is so chaotic, this dynamic is easy to track. The issue, though, is that not a whole lot does change at the end of the day. There's moments where it feels like things might nudge a bit on the scale, but it's never anything serious. Especially when Nico's love is established almost immediately in the first episode, stuff's gotta happen or this dynamic is going to get stale fast. And unfortunately, by the end of episode 25, stale it is. Morihito's character is the real root of the issue here. The show continues to nod to this idea that he's beginning to understand emotions and appreciation, but nothing really comes of that. Even the big episode where the flower blooms out of his head and his love for Nico finally seems to appear, nothing really happens after. My patience really wore thin during the final 2 episodes. The date between Morihito and Nico yields less than nothing, to be honest. He takes her on what is a bad date, and the show's answer is, yeah, but it's nice that Nico understands him. What is that? It's like the show itself gives up by the end of it, not bothering overhyping their gazing at the stars and just moving on. And then, in the finale, it's entirely about the familiars chasing down a bad actor, and in the last 30 seconds, Morihito and Nico hold hands. End of season. 25 episodes. It can almost feel like we went backwards. Nemu and Keigo were far and away the more compelling relationship by this point, which I think really takes away from a show built like this. The comedy-action amalgamation works amazingly well when you keep the core romance chugging along at a steady pace. But when it dies like this, it drags everything else down. Look no further than Love is War for the counterexample. The relationship between Miyuki and Kaguya can move incredibly slowly at times, like a car in deep mud levels of slow. But the key is that it doesn't stop. For all of the side plots and shenanigans afoot, we keep coming back to Kaguya and Miyuki and the slow progression of their romance. We look forward to the next quiet moment between them, get excited at each little move of the needle, because we know that it's important to the larger progression of the story. Witchwatch is the opposite. After the third or fourth time of a story between Nico and Morihito resulting in basically nothing, I came to be apprehensive of their quiet moments together. Is this going to be the time something actually changes? Or is it going to be more of the same? That is losing at a delicate game. Though, to be fair, if it were an easy line to ride, I don't think Love is War would be as special of a show as it is. That consistent guiding plotline lets everything else shine to its full potential. The whirlwind of a story that it is only works because we care about Kaguya and Miyuki, get frustrated when they hold themselves back from love, and feel a real sense of triumph when the dam finally breaks. Not to get too self-referential, but last split screen I led with an axiom of film studies. Relationships are the lifeblood of a story. Witchwatch is not dead, but that pulse is erratic at best in Season 1. Love is War and Witchwatch are two anime that build out a chaotic world of comedy and drama around a central thread of romance concerning their main characters. One has magic, and the other has weird elitist high school social dynamics, but they're united in their embrace of a myriad of different styles and tones from moment to moment. The main differentiating factor to me, though, is the care that each anime gives to that central romance. Where Love is War is intentional in keeping that train moving forward, Witchwatch remains spinning in place most of its first season. That very well may change come Season 2 though, and I think that may end up being the difference between a fun anime and a great one. And for Love is War, I am eagerly anticipating the TV special coming sometime in the future. Not as good as a fourth season, but as someone who's read through the manga, getting some sort of conclusion to the anime is going to be awesome. And that ends this week's episode of Split Screen. If anything else, I hope that I've convinced you that Witchwatch and Love is War are far more similar of shows than they may seem on the surface. Because of that similarity, I was curious as to why I felt so much more strongly about Love is War than Witchwatch. This is the first time I've used this series to inspect such a question. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, liking and subscribing helps a ton, as does hitting the hype button on the mobile app. As always, I'm SlamAnime, and I'll catch you on Friday for Love and Anime.